The neighborhood had always been a quiet sanctuary, neatly lined with pristine lawns and pastel-painted houses, each nestled a little too close to the next. An idyllic scene, often the backdrop for sunlit mornings filled with the hum of lawnmowers and the rhythmic cadence of sprinklers. It was a place where the illusion of harmony was as carefully maintained as the hedgerows that separated each meticulously planned property. Yet beneath this veneer of tranquility, there lurked an undercurrent of tension, a force embodied perfectly by Karen. Karen was the kind of person who wore her authority like a badge, wielding the rulebook of the Homeowners Association with the fervor of a zealot. She was a small woman with a voice that cut through the air like a knife, her eyes always scanning for infractions, real or imagined. In her mind, every stray leaf or misplaced garbage can was an affront to the community's sanctity, a challenge to her dominion. She thrived on order, but more importantly, she thrived on control. My clash with Karen began innocuously enough on a breezy Saturday morning, the kind of morning where the sun just barely kissed the horizon and the air was crisp with possibility. I had decided to repaint my front door, a small act of personal expression, a soft robin's egg blue to replace the drab beige that had welcomed me home for years. Little did I know, this was an unforgivable transgression in Karen's world. A note slipped under my door, typed in perfect alignment, informed me of my violation. It was signed, "Regards, the HOA." But it might as well have been signed in all caps by Karen herself. She had a way of making even a piece of paper feel like a lecture. I held the note, feeling its weight as if it were a summons to court. My first instinct was to brush it off, a minor hiccup in my day. After all, a door was just a door. Karen, however, saw it differently. She thrived on escalation. A few days later, my mailbox was ambushed by another missive, this time detailing a list of infractions: non-compliant door color, improper height of lawn, and an ambiguous accusation of unsanctioned gatherings, each accusation more ludicrous than the last. It was almost impressive, her creativity in finding faults where there were none. I considered my options, weighed them like stones in the palm of my hand. Confrontation was not my nature, not when silence could speak volumes more. My response was deliberate, a gentle refusal to engage. I tended to my lawn, freshly mowed and trimmed to perfection, a silent rebuttal to her claims. My door remained defiantly blue, a splash of personality amid a sea of conformity. I imagined it as a beacon of individuality, a quiet protest against the monochrome order Karen so fiercely defended. In the weeks that followed, Karen intensified her campaign. She patrolled the neighborhood with the diligence of a sentry, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning for any deviation from her vision of perfection. Each of her glances was a dart, aimed with precision at my resolve, but I remained steadfast in my quiet rebellion, a rock in her turbulent sea. In those moments of solitude, I found a strange peace. The absurdity of the situation was almost amusing. Karen was a force of nature, and like any storm, she would pass. Or so I thought. Little did I know, this was merely the prelude to a much larger battle. My response had been calm, but like the calm before a storm, it was only the beginning. Despite the tension, I found solace in the simplicity of maintaining my corner of the world. The scent of freshly cut grass, the soft glow of a newly painted door, these small victories were my refuge. Yet, deep down, a seed of determination was planted, waiting for the right moment to sprout. I had no intention of engaging in Karen's game, but if pushed, I knew I could wield the tools of change. The quiet ones often held the greatest power, and I was nothing if not patient. The morning after that icy confrontation, the neighborhood hummed with an anticipation akin to the charged air before a storm. I knew Karen well enough to predict her next move. She wielded her position in the homeowners association as if it were a broadsword, cutting down anyone who dared defy her meticulously curated vision of suburban perfection. It began with the notices. They appeared overnight, slipped under doors, their edges sharp enough to paper-cut a soul. Each one bore the sterile insignia of the HOA at the top, a neat header that belied the chaos within. My notice listed a litany of offenses, each more absurd than the last. Lawn height exceeding regulation by half an inch, it read, as if the grass itself were conspiring against community harmony. Decorative wind chime producing excessive noise. Never mind that the gentle tinkle could barely be heard over the morning symphony of chirping birds. Karen's handwriting was unmistakable, curling with an elegance that barely masked its underlying venom. My neighbors received similar citations, and soon a chorus of whispered complaints drifted through the streets. She had turned the HOA into her personal tribunal, passing judgment with the swift certainty of a summer squall. As days passed, Karen's reach extended beyond written reprimands. Gossip fluttered between houses like errant leaves caught in a breeze, each tale more colorful than the last. Somewhere between exaggeration and fiction, the stories painted me as a defiant rebel intent on dismantling the idyllic facade she painstakingly maintained. Her whispers had wings and they carried far. I watched, each interaction a silent game of chess. Karen moved her pawns with precision, setting the board for a checkmate she was sure to achieve. Yet, I remained unmoved. A calm within the tempest, I bided my time, certain that she would soon overreach. Then came the day when she decided a public display was necessary. At the next HOA meeting, under the fluorescent glare of the community center's lights, she unleashed her latest decree. New rules, sweeping and severe, designed to suffocate any remaining pockets of individuality. The list was exhaustive. No more than 3 potted plants on a porch, all exterior paint colors pre-approved by a committee she conveniently chaired. Flags of any kind, save for the national flag, prohibited. The irony was not lost on me. It was almost theatrical, this performance of control masked as order. The room was silent, save for the rustling of paper, as residents digested these new restrictions. Her gaze swept the room, daring anyone to challenge her dominion. Yet, beneath her confident facade, I sensed a tremor, a subtle acknowledgement that perhaps the strings she pulled were fraying. In that moment, an idea rooted itself in my mind, as persistent as the dandelions Karen so detested. I would not merely resist. I would rise. The path forward gleamed with a clarity I had not anticipated. The roles would soon reverse. The chairman's seat would be mine, and Karen's reign would end. It was time to sow seeds of change in this manicured landscape, one measured step at a time. There I stood, in the silent moments of dusk, peering through the blinds of my living room window. The sky, a vast canvas of purpling twilight, mirrored the calm facade I wore. Below, the cul-de-sac glowed under the gentle embrace of streetlights, each flicker a testament to the community I quietly vowed to reclaim. Karen's shadow moved across the street, a phantom silhouette against her porch light. She was oblivious to the storm gathering just beyond her view. Her campaign against me had been relentless, like a river carving canyons over centuries. But I, too, was patient. I had spent weeks crafting my own course, gathering evidence and allies with a surgeon's precision, preparing for the day I would redefine the landscape. The process began, innocuously enough, with an envelope, white and unassuming, slipped discreetly into the mailbox of each homeowner. Inside, a simple letter, a call to action, masked as a friendly reminder of the upcoming elections for the HOA board. While Karen flaunted her influence at every corner meeting, I worked in the periphery, planting seeds of change in whispered conversations by the mailboxes and shared moments at neighborhood gatherings. I had learned the language of HOA politics, each rule and regulation a stepping stone toward my goal. I documented everything. The petty infractions she had magnified into condemnations, the bylaws she twisted to tighten her grip. In the quiet hours of night, I pored over spreadsheets and minutes from meetings, building my case with painstaking care. Community members, once wary, began to see the cracks in Karen's dominion. Those she had silenced with her overbearing presence found their voices in the stories I quietly unearthed and shared. Stories of fines levied for garden gnomes and holiday decorations, of letters reprimanding lawns deemed too wild. I approached the election with the stealth of a seasoned hunter. The day of reckoning was marked by a gathering cloudless and bright, as if nature itself conspired in my favor. Chairs scraped against the community hall's polished floor, and murmurs filled the air, a symphony of anticipation. Karen's gaze swept the room, her confidence a brittle shell. I met her eyes, a silent declaration of the inevitable. When the votes were counted, the scales tipped in a satisfying slide of paper and ink. My name, once merely whispered, now echoed across the room. In that moment, as I assumed the mantle of chairman, Karen's reign crumbled like a forgotten empire. She stood, frozen in disbelief, a statue of her own making. I offered her a nod, a gesture of acknowledgement for the unwitting role she played in my ascension. Her removal was swift and decisive, conducted with the same precision she had once employed to dismantle those she deemed unworthy. It was not revenge I sought, but restoration, a return to community over tyranny. The irony was palpable. She had built the gallows upon which her authority now hung, undone by her own hand. As I left the hall, the air was crisp with autumn's promise. The neighborhood, once stifled by her rule, breathed anew. It was a victory not of conquest, but of reclamation, a testament to endurance and quiet resolve. I walked home under the watchful eye of the moon, the path forward illuminated by its gentle glow. The night was full of possibilities, each step toward my door a reaffirmation of what I had reclaimed. A smile touched my lips, small, but certain. The neighborhood was ours once more, and in the end, that was the sweetest victory of all. The neighborhood had been unusually quiet ever since Karen's ill-fated attempt to have me evicted. Her vendetta had backfired spectacularly, leaving her with little more than a tarnished reputation and a few lingering glares from neighbors who had grown weary of her antics. Now, as the new HOA Chairman, I wielded the power she once lorded over us all, but I wielded it with a lighter touch, a quiet strength that didn't need to shout to be heard. People noticed the changes. The monthly meetings, once dominated by Karen's dogged pursuits of petty violations, were now bastions of community spirit. The oppressive weight of her stare, her clipped words had lifted, leaving room for laughter and genuine conversations. It was as if someone had pushed open a window, letting fresh air cleanse a room that had grown stale with discontent. Tension simmered beneath the surface, though. Change, even when welcome, has a way of unsettling those who have grown accustomed to their chains. The transformation wasn't without its dissenters. A shadow of doubt lingered in some corners, whispers that perhaps power would corrupt me as it had Karen. I felt it in the cautious smiles, the averted gazes. People wondered if I would follow her path. Yet, I forged ahead, guided by an unyielding resolve to prove that leadership need not be synonymous with tyranny. I saw it as a dance, this delicate balance between authority and community. A dance Karen had never learned. Her steps had been heavy, clumsy, selfish. Mine were meant to be light, almost invisible, guiding rather than dictating. The changes were small at first. A softened approach to enforcement, a more flexible interpretation of the rules. The gardens began to bloom with a riot of colors as restrictions loosened, residents expressing themselves in hues that had once been deemed inappropriate. The neighborhood was more vibrant, more alive. It was a testament to what could flourish when fear was replaced with trust. Still, Karen loomed, a specter unwilling to fade into obscurity. Her attempts to regain control were subtle but persistent, as if she were trying to reclaim dominion over a kingdom that no longer existed. Her power had been an illusion, a mirage that vanished the moment I had stepped into the role she coveted. But some wounds are slow to heal, and Karen's presence was a reminder of the past we had left behind. A past we must remain vigilant against. One afternoon, as I walked through the neighborhood, admiring the gardens and nodding to passers-by, I caught sight of Karen. She stood on her porch, arms crossed, eyes fixed on me with a look that was more contemplative than confrontational. There was a vulnerability in her that I had not seen before, a crack in the armor of certainty she had worn so fiercely. It was a moment of revelation, a silent admission that perhaps she had been wrong, that perhaps there was another way. For a moment, I considered speaking, breaking the silence that stretched between us like a taut wire. But some things are better left unsaid. I nodded, a small gesture of acknowledgement, of understanding. Her eyes followed me as I continued down the street, leaving her to reckon with the quiet storm within herself. The neighborhood was changing, and so was Karen, slowly, imperceptibly. Like a river smoothing the edges of a stone, time and reflection would either soften her or leave her behind, a relic of a bygone era. As for me, I embraced each day with a quiet gratitude, knowing that power was not a weapon, but a tool, one that could build bridges far sturdier than the walls Karen had once erected. The week following the meeting, my mind danced with a calm determination that felt almost surreal. Like the eye of a storm, I sat in the quiet after the chaos that Karen had stirred. Papers were scattered across my kitchen table, each one a piece of the puzzle that would spell her undoing. The bylaws were my new gospel, each clause a verse I had memorized, each section a chapter that told a story of oversight and governance. Somewhere within those pages lay the key to my plan. My mind worked like a clock, each tick bringing me closer to my goal. Karen had tried to shatter my peace by wielding the rules as weapons, but I had learned to craft a shield from those very same statutes. The day I submitted my candidacy for the HOA chairmanship felt like the first breath after surfacing from a dive. I kept it quiet, stealthy as a cat's shadow at dusk. The paperwork was filed quietly, with the signature of inevitability. I knew that others were weary of Karen's reign. Her iron fist had worn thin over time, revealing the rust beneath. Election day arrived without fanfare. A nondescript Tuesday, wrapped in the guise of normalcy. Yet, beneath the calm exterior, anticipation simmered like a kettle on the verge of boiling. The meeting room was a neutral battleground. Its beige walls and carpeted floors betrayed no allegiances. It was the faces of the members that told the true story, some weary, some expectant, a few still clinging to the status quo. When the votes were counted, silence followed. A silence charged with the weight of unspoken relief and the dawning of change. Karen's face remained a mask of impassivity, but her eyes flickered with disbelief. It was a fleeting moment, like the flash of a storm on the horizon. I felt no triumph, only the steady hum of resolution. Quietly, I assumed the chairmanship. The transition was seamless, a gentle turning of pages rather than a dramatic finale. The power was in the subtlety, the elegance of change that whispered rather than roared. With the authority now in my hands, I set about my work with methodical precision. The bylaws were revised, loopholes closed, transparency woven into the fabric of governance. Karen's influence unraveled like a threadbare tapestry, each tug deliberate and unyielding. My actions were not born of vengeance but of justice, the quiet justice that knows its own strength. Karen's removal was inevitable, her own hubris the architect of her downfall. The board's decision was unanimous, the message clear. The community was not an empire to be ruled, but a tapestry to be tended. Her departure was marked not by drama or spectacle, but by a simple nod of understanding. As she left, the air felt lighter, as if a storm had finally passed. The community breathed anew. The weight lifted. In that moment, I realized power was not in the title, but in the ability to restore balance. I had not just won a position. I had reclaimed the peace of a community. Quietly, I resumed my life. My garden once again a sanctuary. The neighborhood thrummed with the gentle rhythm of coexistence. As for Karen, she faded from the tapestry, her thread a cautionary tale of what happens when power forgets purpose. In the end, my revenge was not in her removal, but in the restoration of harmony. Like the gentle unfolding of a new day, it was a beginning free from the shadows of the past. The air was thick with anticipation. I felt it as I walked into the community center, a silent audience to the drama that would quietly reshape the neighborhood dynamics. The room was filled, yet strangely still, like the eerie calm before a summer storm. Karen sat at the table, her usual seat, an island of self-righteousness in a sea of uncertainty. Her plan had seemed foolproof, or so she thought, but machinations born of pettiness often crumble when faced with resilience. I took my place at the head of the table, the weight of the gavel in my hand a comforting promise of justice. The meeting began, and with it, the slow unraveling of Karen's reign. Her eyes flickered with a mixture of disbelief and defiance as the agenda unfolded. Each item, a subtle reminder of the community's will to reclaim its voice. Months of whispers and clandestine conversations now bore fruit. The neighbors I once thought were indifferent had revealed themselves as allies, tired of the status quo, yearning for change. I glanced at the faces that surrounded me, each etched with stories of their own. Stories Karen had overlooked in her single-minded pursuit of control. Stories she had tried to silence with her rules, her fines, her threats. Not anymore. As the meeting progressed, the air shifted. It was almost imperceptible, but it was there. A newfound solidarity. When the time came to vote on the new regulations, a ripple of energy passed through the room. Karen's confident facade faltered as ballots were cast. Her eyes darted, searching for support, but found only the cool gaze of her peers, tired of being pawns in her game. The vote passed. The silence that followed was loud with implication. Karen's grip on the community had been gently, yet irrevocably, released. Her face twisted in an expression caught somewhere between incredulity and inevitability. For a moment, I almost felt a pang of empathy. Almost. But the memory of her attempts to uproot me from my own home quickly tempered it. She stood then, a solitary figure against the backdrop of our newfound unity. Her departure was inevitable, yet she lingered, as if clinging to the last vestiges of authority. And then, with one final wordless glance, she walked away, leaving behind a legacy of discord that we were determined to heal. With Karen gone, the mood lifted. Conversations sparked, smiles exchanged, the first steps towards rebuilding trust. Neighbors spoke, not just about grievances, but about aspirations, visions of a community that once again felt like home. I sat back, the gavel now resting quietly beside me. It was done. The power had shifted, not just in name, but in spirit. Watching them, I realized this was more than just a victory over Karen. It was a reclamation of a shared dream, a dream of a neighborhood where everyone's voice mattered. In the days that followed, change was slow but certain. The oppressive tension that Karen had cultivated gradually dissipated, replaced by a lighter, more open atmosphere. We began to see each other again, not as adversaries or obstacles, but as neighbors, as people, as a community. I would often see Karen around. Now a quiet figure on the periphery, her influence waned but not entirely vanished. Lessons learned from her tenure lingered, shaping a future more inclusive, more considerate. The story didn't end with her departure. It merely began anew, a tale of resilience, of quiet rebellion, and of the gentle power of unity. I stood at my window one evening, watching the sunset bathe our small world in gold. It was beautiful, and it was ours, once more.